Laravel was one of the first frameworks to use PHP 5.3 as a minimum PHP version, which gave us some advantages over things like CodeIgniter. Well, I mainly started using PHP because it was really easy to learn and use, and then it was also really easy to host. And it also had PHP, I think, has pretty good documentation that's easy to search and read. CodeIgniter also had good documentation.
Hey Taylor, welcome to Laravel India Podcast. How you are excited about this podcast?
Oh, I'm very excited to be here. Of course, I'll be coming to India soon, live and in person. So this will be a good way to get started.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever I have any guest in my podcast, I told them that, hey, we are here because of the Laracon India. But for you, I believe I have to say, we are here because of you, because of Laravel. And very, very excited to meet you in person. And so Laravel has changed everyone's life, including me, including you, I believe. So This is going to be really fun. I'm going to start with one funny thing, which is like, I really like your dressing style. The t-shirt you wear, the floral kind of, and it looks so cool. And I tried to get that in India, but I didn't find anything.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so Taylor, tell me like about the Laracon India, because it's happening first time in India. It's way bigger than any ever happened Laracon. So have you ever thought before of having Laracon in Asia, not just in India? So because you didn't have any Asia conference for Laravel.
Yeah, we haven't totally. I mean, I haven't really known anyone that could organize it until Laracon India, and we had actually planned to do Laracon India in 2020. So one of the organizers flew to Laracon US in 2019. We had spoken previously about a possible Laracon India event. So he came to Laracon US in 2019, and we spoke about it in person. We decided that we would try to do a full Laracon India in 2020. And then, of course, once COVID-19 happened, we had to delay everything basically until now, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, Laracon India was supposed to happen in 2020, but we just got delayed because of the pandemic. And now we're finally having it in 2023.
Right. That's really good. So have you ever thought that Laracon India is going to be so bigger? We have like 1,000+ tickets sold.
I had a feeling it would be pretty popular just because India we do have the most web traffic to Laravel.com from India. And then also of, I think the United States is second or third place. So I knew it would be a pretty big conference. So I'm happy that it's turned out to be really the biggest Laracon that's ever been done. So really cool.
Right. It is going to be. So I am going to teach you one Hindi word which you can use. So it's not that like that useful in general life, but since we are coders, we use this. So in India, whenever there is a bug in your code, and generally we say that, hey, we have the bug. So in India, we call it code fat gaya.
Fat gaya?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So code fat gaya. So everyone, if you saw people are talking, hey, yesterday my code fat gaya. So that means there was the big bug in that code base. So this is how we talk. And whenever you are here, I will going to teach you some other funny things, but not that funny, maybe useful things. I thought people like how to ask for food, how to say bye-bye. So, but I don't want to waste time on that because I have a long list of questions for you.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so let's get to the serious thing, Taylor. So tell me about the Taylor Otwell before Laravel, before even coming into the coding world. That means how was your life and how you landed into the coding?
When I was a kid, so like when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I was always really into technology stuff, gaming, computers, the internet, which was, much younger than it is now. And I wanted to build websites for my favorite video games, which at the time was Pokemon, when I was 11 or 12 years old. So I would build websites about Pokemon, mainly, just like basic HTML. And I don't even think I used much CSS at the time, but maybe basic CSS and HTML with tables and things like that. So that's how I kind of got started. I was just always very interested in technology and the internet and making my own things on the internet from a very young age, basically.
Okay. So how then you get into the professional coding?
After I went to university for information technology, so I actually received a degree in information technology. And after university, I was hired by a company here in the U.S. that primarily codes in Microsoft.NET and then also COBOL, which is an older language from the 1960s. And so I wrote a lot of .NET code and a lot of COBOL code. And that was my first professional job, which I did for about 3 years. I worked for that company before I wrote Laravel and then worked for Userscape writing PHP code.
Right. But I heard that you were using Ruby on Rails before creating the Laravel?
I tried a lot of different frameworks.
Okay.
At the time, I was using a very cheap Windows laptop, and it felt like a lot of the Ruby on Rails developers were using Mac, and there wasn't a lot of instructions for how to use Ruby on Rails on Windows. But I was able to get PHP running, so I played with Ruby on Rails a little bit, but I mainly started playing with PHP, and I'd only used PHP 1 or 2 times before that, so I was pretty new to PHP, but I started using CodeIgniter. I can't remember if I tried Symfony or not, but I mainly tried CodeIgniter, and that became like my favorite framework when I first started using PHP.
Okay. So in 2011, you started Laravel, and you started with the language PHP, and at that time, people were saying like PHP is dying. Yeah, people are still saying that PHP is dying, but that's not the case. So, but the PHP is today, and PHP back in 2011 is really different. It was not that cool, which is that cool and powerful and having amazing features like right now we have. So why are you choosing like PHP to create a new framework? How that came into your mind?
Well, I mainly started using PHP because it was really easy to learn and use, and then it was also really easy to host. And it also had PHP, I think, has pretty good documentation that's easy to search and read. CodeIgniter also had good documentation. And you're right. At the time, a lot of people were saying PHP is dying. Everyone's moving to either Ruby on Rails or Node, which was already out at the time as well. But Laravel was one of the first frameworks to use PHP 5.3 as a minimum PHP version, which gave us some advantages over things like CodeIgniter and other frameworks at the time, because we were able to use namespaces and anonymous functions or closures from the very beginning of Laravel. And a lot of other frameworks were not using those features because PHP 5.3 was pretty new at the time. So Laravel was one of the first frameworks that was PHP 5.3 only and felt pretty much, felt kind of like modern PHP.
Mm-hmm. So you have created Laravel as a side project or just for solving your problem?
Yes. Yeah. I meant to say that. So I never intended to actually write like a framework, that I was going to release open source. I was mainly creating something for myself to be able to solve my own problems, but I never really had like some big dream that it would be this big popular framework. That wasn't really my goal at the time.
Okay. That's really great. So you have started with PHP Laravel. Now, suppose in 2023, you have to create Laravel and you have to choose one language. Which will be that apart from PHP, obviously?
Apart from PHP, I would probably just choose JavaScript, I'm guessing, because it is sort of like the other web language, and you write your front end in JavaScript. But that's really like almost the same as 2011. People were mainly writing stuff in Ruby or in JavaScript, or if they weren't writing PHP for the web. So I think things are pretty similar. I don't think I would choose Ruby because there's already Ruby on Rails. But I don't think JavaScript really has anything. I mean, it has some things that are kind of close to Ruby on Rails or Laravel, but maybe not as mature.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so let's get back to your life, and I just want to know when you had created your first dollar. So is it on your job or before that?
In coding, you mean, or just in life?
just in life.
Yeah, I worked when I was a kid, 16 or 17. I worked at a grocery store, actually. So that's when I first had my like actual first job, when I made my own money.
Okay,
basically like a supermarket.
Nice. So coming back to the Laravel, you have created, not intended to create any framework, but it got popularity. So once it got popularity, have you ever thought like to create this as a paid one? Because obviously that time you didn't have any paid product. So what was your thought process? Because it was open source, anybody can use it. Now you are getting PRs, you are getting requests for the features. Mm-hmm. So what was in your mind at that time to earn something from Laravel, or even this was in your mind or not?
It wasn't really in my mind at first how to do that, because Laravel, it wasn't like a super big framework, so it didn't really occur to me that I could turn it into a business. But the very first time I made any money from Laravel was when I wrote my first ebook, which was, I think 2012 or 2013. And, but that was the first time I made any like real money from Laravel.
Okay. So that was good. So you got first earning from Laravel by writing a book over it. Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yep.
So you are not just a developer, you're not just a programmer, you are now managing conferences, you are managing teams, you are having amazing SaaS products, you are super active on Twitter. So how you manage your time, and how you got time to learn new things? Because it feels like you are having so great knowledge of front end, back end, like DevOps, databases, everywhere you have expertise. So how you get the time to learn, and how you manage your time?
It's pretty challenging. I keep a pretty strict to-do list about like what I want to do each day. So I'm a big user of the app Todoist. I use that to pretty much manage every day of my life, pretty much. But it is challenging. So I just structure my day. At the start of the day, I deal with customer support, and then I deal with GitHub pull requests, and then I kind of work with the team on whatever they're working on and review code. But I just try to stay like very structured and like have a planned outline for the day. At the end of one day, I'll usually make like my to-do list for the next day, pretty much.
That's good. And how you learn about new things?
Oh gosh, I feel like it's harder now. When Laravel first started, I actually had more free time because there weren't as many pull requests, and I didn't have any employees or any SaaS products. But now it's pretty hard. So sometimes like I'll read at night, like read blog articles while I'm laying in bed, or just like on my laptop, I might read about something. But it's pretty challenging, actually. Just try to sneak in some reading when I can.
Right. So are you following a Pomodoro technique?
The Pomodoro technique, yes. I have not. I don't follow it very strictly, but I'm familiar with the technique.
Okay. How do you feel about like? Is it good?
Yeah, I think that's useful, actually. Anything that helps you structure your day. I mean, some of the tips I do are like, if I'm having trouble getting motivated or working on something hard, I'll work on something easy for a little bit, just to like actually complete a task and then maybe complete a few tasks. And then once you build momentum, I feel like it's easier to start working on like a bigger task, if that makes sense. So if I need to write like a big page of documentation, I'll fix some small things in the documentation first as like a warm up, and then I'll start working on like a bigger page of documentation.
Right. That's really good. Documentation, you said, like, is the key part of Laravel. And coming back to the structuring your time is really important, because if you are not structuring your time, you are just losing it, and time is the only thing, only asset I believe you have in your life.
Yeah.
So once again, you have amazing SaaS product lineup, which is around Laravel, obviously. And right now, it's Laravel has a yearly release cycle, but before that, we had the 6-month release cycle, and every 6 months you had an amazing product, and that product was so useful that everyone was eager to get into that. How do you get the idea of creating new product, plus how you validate that idea that, okay, this is the idea which is going to be the first priority, and this is the one which will be second priority?
So going back to the beginning with Laravel Forge, which was my first commercial idea, it was really because I was provisioning a lot of servers sort of by hand, but I had written bash scripts to help automate it a little bit. And then it occurred to me to build like a user interface for creating these servers. And then that's basically how I started building Forge. So I was mainly, again, kind of like when I started Laravel, I was just solving a problem that I had. If someone else found it useful, that's great. But I was perfectly happy just to solve it for myself. And pretty much every other product since then has been me solving my own problem, either with Envoy or with zero downtime deployments, or with Spark to automate like SaaS billing. All of those were solving problems that I had. With Laravel Vapor, that's probably the only one where I started working on it just out of personal interest. Laravel Vapor is our serverless deployment tool. So I was really interested in serverless, and it was really appealing to me to not have to worry about server maintenance and operating system updates and all of that. And so I started working on this serverless deployment platform, Vapor, and I just kind of got obsessed with working on it until it was totally done.
Right. So when you have created the Forge, obviously at that time you didn't have the like expertise or any prior experience of selling a SaaS product, but now you have. So how do you feel? Like, how do you see yourself as a product owner when you had the Forge and now you have a lot more? In terms of obviously marketing and like how you sell that product.
Yeah, I think back then I had, or now I have like much higher standards, I would say, for like quality than I had back then. So like the design of all of our products is a lot more professional than it was back in 2014. But I mean, part of that is because I didn't have the resources really to hire like a designer and employees to work on things and stuff like that.
Right.
But, you know, we're very focused on, now that Laravel is more mature, we also have a lot more customers to keep happy. So we have to make sure that everything keeps running smoothly, that we don't have as many breaking changes as we used to have, just because thousands of people around the world are using this product, and we have to keep it really stable.
Right. So what's your suggestion to the people who are trying to create a new SaaS product on their own? So how they get started? What should they focus on first, like feature, customer, backend, front end? What's your suggestion for that people?
So it's changed over the years. So back when I started, back like 7 or 8 years ago, I always focused on the back end first. But now lately I'm more focused on the front end first, because that's kind of what the customer actually uses. And I like to try to figure that out first to make sure it's actually like feels like a compelling product and is nice to use. Because I ran into problems building the backend first when things got products got a little bit more complicated where I would build the whole back end. And it was really, sometimes it would become hard. Once I started building the front end, I would discover things needed to work kind of in a different way, because when I started trying to put the front end with the back end, it made things maybe awkward in certain spots. So now I almost always would start with the front end, but that wasn't always the case. That's sort of something that I've learned out of experience.
Mm-hmm. And how you decide for the pricing, because pricing is the key point for any SaaS product. And I have talked to many people and they were saying like, look to your competitors. But for you create products which didn't have any competitor in our ecosystem. So what's your thought process while setting up pricing for your product?
It's actually very difficult for me because with Laravel, there are wildly different types of customers. So some of our customers are hobby developers that are sort of on their own, solo developers, and they may not have a lot of income. And then other customers of Laravel Forge are very large companies that make millions of dollars per year. And so it's hard to come up with pricing plans that work well for both of those situations. But I've always tried to keep Laravel stuff priced pretty low because we have so many solo developers, hobby developers, people that are just learning how to do development, that I always try to price things pretty low. But it's probably important to know, your audience of who's signing up for your app. If it's mainly businesses, then of course you can charge a little more. But if it's mainly individuals, you have to charge quite a bit less, I think, to get people to sign up.
Okay. And you are working on some amazing new product. I think you said that it's going to be open source. Tell me about that.
Well, we've been working on a lot of different things. So we're releasing this with Laravel 10, of course, which, as you may know, is coming up for release probably next week. We're releasing a new package called Laravel Pennant, PENNANT, which is a word that means like a small flag. That is a package for managing feature flags. We're also working on 2 other packages that will be open source that haven't been revealed yet. We have working titles for them. One is called Laravel Pulse, and then the other one is called Laravel Reverb. But I'm hoping to have those done for this summer. But the thing that's coming out soon is Laravel Pennant and Laravel 10.
So I worked at Pfizer, and we use feature flag extensively for every feature. And when you announced this feature flag package, we were like, oh great, we are now having an official package. Let's wait for Laravel 10 and swap that with our existing one. So yeah, that's really, really useful for every developer. I was talking about some project which is having started with B letter.
Oh yeah, Beep. Yeah, Laravel Beep.
Beep. Yeah.
Beep. Beep was an application that I finished actually. It was a sort of a I don't know what's the right word for it. Like a kind of a productivity accountability application where you can check in with your team on a daily basis. And I wrote the whole thing and I finished the whole thing, back end and front end, but I didn't totally love it. I didn't feel like it was really as good as I wanted it to be. But the idea was to open source it as sort of a learning resource for people to see how we write Laravel code, kind of in a whole app. But I don't know. I may revisit it at some point. I still jot down ideas I have for it. As they come to me, I'll put them in my Notion document for the project. But but yeah, to answer your question, the app was totally finished. It is totally finished. It's on my laptop right now, but I never released it because I just wasn't totally in love with it.
I'm really excited for this project because when I was learning how to create the package at that time, Laravel Telescope was released, and I was like, okay, this is the time I can learn directly from Taylor Otwell. So I looked into the code base of that package and I learned that, okay, this is how he structured things and this is how he code. So if you have a project which you have created, obviously that's really good, going to be useful for newcomers, for learners, and yeah, that would be like blast, I believe, just like we have Laravel.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay, so let's get back to Laravel. And I just want to know, like, is there anything in Laravel you are not happy or any idea you have ever worked, but you feel like it was not that great? So do you have anything in your life?
Yeah, there's been some things over the years. Most of them I've removed. So back in 2015, we added, I think it was 2015 or 2016, we added a command bus to Laravel. I'm not sure if you remember that. I feel like that was a bad idea. That was mainly like, it was kind of like a fad in PHP at the time that people were talking about this command bus pattern. I don't really see anyone talk about it that much anymore, but at the time it was kind of a popular thing that people were talking about. So that's why, I mean, even today there's still like a bus facade in Laravel, just so we don't, because we haven't actually like taken it out and broken that feature. And under the hood, some of the Q stuff uses it a little bit, but yeah, that was kind of a bad idea. Most of the other things, like, I wasn't happy with, I've either updated or removed or deprecated or whatever, just because it's been 12 years. So most of the bad ideas have been taken out by now.
Right. It actually happened with everyone. Some things you do very amazing, some are not that amazing, but if you find something is not that good, you should have the courage to say that this is not that good, I'm going to remove it. And you have done that. And this is why I just want to know, like, what do you think, what you do differently for Laravel and the ecosystem, everything, which is why Laravel is so famous. So what you do differently than other people's around the, like, other frameworks, other language frameworks?
I think Laravel has always been focused on the developer and making them as productive and basically happy as possible. So it's very much fine-tuned for a single developer to be able to productively build an entire full stack web application. And I think a lot of frameworks are actually they don't focus on that as hard on like the developer experience aspect of web development. And I think Ruby on Rails was really like the pioneer for, creating this very developer focused, enjoyable framework. And so Laravel sort of learned from that and built on top of that in PHP.
So this means like you created something, not just like a framework to create websites or create application, but you more focused on developer happiness and how they code. And this is what I believe so true, that because when I landed into Laravel, I saw that, okay, this is like a plain English, like user all user find first, something like that. So that was so easy to understand, and even it just stuck in your mind. First time you read it and stuck in your mind that you don't have to write that amazing queries which you have to remember, create the logic, and then finally get the solution. Laravel makes things so easy. And I like the name of one package, which is Laravel Breeze. I believe Laravel itself is a breeze for everything you do. So connected to this, Laravel Eloquent is, I believe, is the most amazing feature of Laravel. And I heard that you had the difficulties on while creating the Eloquent thing for Laravel. So is that like the idea you had in your mind when you had created Laravel, or it just evolved, like how best Eloquent is this evolved, or you had the idea that I'm going to make it that amazing?
It has definitely evolved. So in the beta releases of Laravel, not many people know this, but we actually used a different ORM. We used a package called PHP Active Record, which is no longer maintained. And even back then, it was actually not maintained very, very much even then. So once I saw that it wasn't maintained, I decided to write our own ORM, and that was Eloquent, which was inspired by a couple of old PHP packages called Paris, I think was the name of the ORM, and it worked kind of similar to how Eloquent works today. But the first version of Eloquent was more basic. It didn't have things like eager loading. It didn't have like polymorphic relationships and some of the more advanced features that it has today. It was just more basic, creating, updating, and basic relationships. But it's definitely evolved over the years, and I've rewritten Eloquent several times actually throughout the history of Laravel from scratch, pretty much.
Oh, that's great. So you have that knowledge of databases, MySQL, and every other databases knowledge, or you were started learning about each and every database and then added into Eloquent?
The main database I had experience with was MySQL and SQLite. I had never really used Postgres, and I had never really used SQL Server, but I don't think in the first release of Laravel that we even supported Microsoft SQL Server. I think that came later. So I think at first it supported Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite.
Okay. So that was initially.
Mm-hmm.
And now you also have the NoSQL databases.
I've never used like MongoDB. I've never actually used that in any of my own applications. So I never had a lot of experience with that. And I think a lot of people ask me, we really want a MongoDB Laravel package, but the issue was I had never used that in any of my applications, so I didn't really know the best way to build that kind of package. But it was very popular request, especially when Laravel first started, because MongoDB was a little bit more popular back then than it is now. But yeah, it was quite popular.
Right. So for me, Laravel is amazing, obviously because of some great features and the community and support. But one important reason is the documentation, and not just for Laravel, obviously the ecosystem of Laravel, every product you create. So how do you get to know that the documentation is super important thing, and how do you able to write that clean documentation? I just want to know, because I feel like writing documentation for me is a boring task. I believe that, hey, let's just do and code something instead of writing documentation.
I was very inspired by the CodeIgniter documentation. I thought the CodeIgniter documentation was really well done. When I first started loading CodeIgniter, I was actually very impressed by their documentation. It's probably still like some of the best framework documentation in PHP. So I was very inspired by that, and I started writing my own documentation to be just as good as CodeIgniter's. And I spend a lot of time really like refining the documentation, reading it, proofreading it, adjusting it until I feel like it's just perfect. I don't know. I've read a few books about writing. I've had a lot of practice writing documentation by this point, so I've gotten better at it over the years. But I actually don't mind writing documentation. I kind of like it, so I think that's maybe why it works out well for Laravel.
So with this, I just want to ask one question, which I was planning to ask at the end, which is like, which book you prefer for developers? Since you have said that like you read some books for writing, so can you recommend 3 books for developers?
I think that the Sandy Metz writes good books on programming. What is that book called? Let me find it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so there's a book called Refactoring. It's written, one of the authors is Martin Fowler. The copy I read was actually the Ruby edition. I don't think there's a PHP edition, but the Refactoring book is kind of interesting. Sandy Metz, like I said, writes good books on coding. And then the other, this isn't really a coding book, but the other book that was really influential for me in terms of software development was the book Getting Real by 37 Signals, which, created Basecamp. I read that book back while I was creating Laravel, and it really helped shape what my focus was on Laravel and focus on getting the product right for the end user and for the developer. And that, I feel like that was a really influential book during Laravel's creation.
Okay. And which book helped you to write the documentation?
there's a really small book called Elements of Style by William and Strunk, I think is the author. It's two authors. It's barely like a book. It's more like a booklet. It's like 60 pages maybe. But it's about writing really clear English. And it's pretty helpful actually for writing documentation, because one of the problems I see with most people's documentation is their sentences are too complicated and they're too long. And this book really focuses on writing kind of short, concise sentences that are really clear. Some people actually, like, their writing, it almost comes across like too smart, too intelligent and too complex, and so it can be hard to follow and kind of unclear. So yeah, Elements of Style is the name of the book. I actually have it here in my office.
Okay, Taylor. So I just want to know, what is your daily routine in terms of obviously your work, and how do you balance your personal plus professional life?
Well, like I said earlier, I'm a big user of Todoist. I'm a big organizer as far as like what I need to get done on any given day. And I started doing that actually all the way back in university. At the time, I used index cards to organize like a list of everything I wanted to get done that day. But then I switched to Todoist. But I use it pretty much the same way, where I make a list of all my tasks for that day. And at the end of the day, I make a list for the next day. So what it looks like practically for me is that I usually start work about 8 a.m. After I take my kids to school. And then I answer customer support emails and look at GitHub pull requests. And Laravel usually gets something like 15 to 20 pull requests a day. So I pretty much have to do it every single day, or we're going to get really behind really quickly. Because if I didn't check it for even 1 week, there would be over 100 pull requests probably.
Exactly.
So I do pull requests, and that takes me a couple of hours a day, probably actually. And then I usually work on, I usually have something to review from, one of the staff here at Laravel, either like a pull request to Laravel Forge or Vapor or something like that, or a question, or so I'll do that. And then that's pretty much like the first half of the day. And then after lunch, I'll work on whatever I'm personally working on. It could be like just an interesting project I'm tinkering with, or a new feature for Laravel, or a new package idea or something like that. So that's kind of the routine for the day. Then I stop working around 5, and I don't do a lot of work after that, mainly because, since Laravel is my full-time job, I don't really actually need to work like late at night like I used to back when I had a regular job and Laravel was just like an open source project. So usually at 5 p.m., I'm pretty much done working for the day.
Wow, that's really great. Super, super productive like routine you have. Great. So Taylor, I believe you are using Sublime Text till now.
That's pretty much what I've used since the very beginning. Why
not like VS Code or PHP Storm or Vim maybe?
I do like VS Code actually. I don't have any big issue with VS Code. I like PHP Storm too, but I think I just used Sublime Text for so many years that it's very hard for me to switch because I'm just so used to Sublime Text. Right. And it's just, of course, anyone that's used Sublime Text knows it's like very fast. So I'm just used to like the very high speed of Sublime Text. I know a little bit of Vim, but I'm not a Vim expert at all. But I can edit the file and save the file and do like basic things I need to do. But I'm not really like a Vim ninja, so to speak.
Yeah, so with the Vim, the first thing people are struggling with is like, how do we get out of this editor? Yeah. And
I used Vim in college or at university quite a bit because all of my professors, they taught us the basics of how to use Vim because we used it in pretty much all of our classes.
Yeah, and you're right, like it's really hard to switch between the editor. I was using VS Code, I think, from the start when it was released. And recently I tried to move to PHP Storm. But after using 1 month, I was like, let's get back to VS Code because it's so handy and I have all my shortcuts for that. So I feel productive on my favorite VS Code, favorite editor, which is VS Code, not on any other one. So I can understand like why you are sticking with Sublime Text. So next one is like which future technology you are excited about, or are you excited about the Chat GPT also?
Yeah, I am excited about Chat GPT actually. I'm actually much more excited about AI than I was about Web3 or cryptocurrency or anything like that. I find AI actually quite a bit more interesting, especially Chat GPT, which to me feels like a new kind of calculator, like it's like a new tool to, instead of math, like it really seems to speed up writing, research, asking it questions and getting answers without a million Google ads on search or something like that. It's just I think it actually is like a very convenient tool that will be useful, genuinely for many years to come. And I'm sure will only get better and better.
So are you going to ask ChatGPT for writing any documentation?
I mean, I probably could, honestly. It's actually really impressive. So yeah, I'm impressed by ChatGPT.
But I believe ChatGPT will say that, hey Taylor, you are writing documentation better than me.
Yeah, maybe for now, but maybe not for long.
Right. So I just want to know, like, what is the vision of Laravel for next 5 years?
Gosh, it's so hard to predict, 5 years in the future. I think, we're obviously going to continue focused on making it as easy as possible to build full stack web applications. That's sort of the focus of Laravel. I'm very interested in the upcoming Livewire 3 release that Caleb Porzio is working on. We have some ideas for new things to build around Livewire 3 that I think will be interesting. But, I really actually only think about a year in advance. I don't really plan 3, 4, 5 years in advance, just because everything has been very hard to predict, exactly. what the trend will be at that time. So we have plans for this year, but then we'll see what next year brings.
Right. So I know that Laravel is so great. If it has like passed a decade, it can pass more decades in the future. It's really amazing tool. You have built something which has not obviously not changed your life. It has changed life of all the developer who are using Laravel. And if I talk about me, I can literally say that because of Laravel, my life is flipped. So what I was and what I am now is 100% because of Laravel, because of you, Taylor. So once again, thank you from bottom of my heart. So thank you very much for that. So with this, I just want to end this podcast by saying that you are really amazing person, not just as a professional, but as a person. And it was like dream to have you in my podcast, and I still can't believe that I am finishing this podcast. So once again, thank you for that also.